Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome back to BC Stories. Today's story is about a woman who thought she was rescuing a stranger. Turns out, the stranger rescued her. And the way it happened, I didn't see it coming. I don't think you will either. So before we get into today's story, let me say something. I think most of us have someone we haven't spoken to in a while. Not because we forgot about them, but because the silence just went on too long. And at some point, the silence became the reason. You know what I mean? If you've ever held on to anger longer than you should have, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. It's beautiful to see how far these stories go. The first time Clara Maddox heard the word dementia, she was standing in a hospital hallway that smelled like hand sanitizer and bad coffee. A woman she'd never seen before was holding Margaret, her Margaret, and crying so hard she could barely breathe. A doctor was explaining something about cognitive decline, about unreliable memory, about confabulation. Clara heard the words, but they didn't land. Not really, because all she could think was, that woman is lying. Margaret told me what happened. Her daughter abandoned her. That's the truth. I know it's the truth. But here's the thing about truth. Sometimes we hold on to a version of it so tightly that when the real thing shows up, we don't recognize it. Let me take you back. 2 months before this hallway, before the diagnosis, before everything fell apart. Clara saw her the first time around 2 in the afternoon. Thanksgiving Day, the sun was out, but the forecast said the temperature would drop hard by evening. She was running errands, picking up last-minute things, nothing urgent, nothing important, and on her way past the small park near the shops, she noticed an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench, no coat heavy enough for what was coming, no bag, no phone, just sitting. Clara noticed, and Clara kept walking. I'm not telling you that to make her look bad. I'm telling you that because it's honest. And if we're being honest with each other, most of us would have done the same thing. You see someone, you assume they're fine, you assume someone else will help, and you keep moving. That's not cruelty. That's just Tuesday, or in this case, Thursday. She went home, unpacked her bags, started getting things ready for the evening, and then she realized she'd forgotten a few things, so she went back out. Same bench, same woman, hours later. Clara stopped. Not because she was a hero, not because she had some deep moral awakening right there on the sidewalk. She stopped because it was getting cold and this woman was still here and it was Thanksgiving. And something in her just wouldn't let her walk past a second time. That's it. That's the whole reason. Just basic, uncomplicated human kindness, the kind that doesn't need applause. She walked over, sat down next to her, said hi. The woman's name was Margaret. She was 79. She was pleasant, warm even, a little confused about how she'd ended up there, but she brushed past that quickly. And when Clara gently asked if she had family, if there was someone she could call, Margaret's face changed. My daughter abandoned me, she said. Quiet, matter of fact, like she was reporting the weather. Clara didn't probe. She didn't interrogate. She just looked at this woman, alone on Thanksgiving, nowhere to go, with a story that hurt too much to tell twice, and made a decision. She took Margaret home. She fed her, gave her warm clothes, set up the spare room, told her she could stay as long as she needed. And here's where I need to tell you something about Clara, because she wasn't just being kind to a stranger. She was carrying something of her own. Clara had been divorced for about 5 years, married young, early 20s, thought love would fix everything. It didn't. The marriage lasted 3 years, and when it ended, she was financially wrecked and emotionally shattered. Then her father passed away, left behind an inheritance, and Clara, still raw from the divorce, felt she deserved more of it than her mother and sister were willing to give. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't, but instead of sitting down and talking it through like adults, she said things, harsh things, the kind of words you can't unhear. And then she used her divorce, her pain, her exhaustion, her heartbreak, as a blanket excuse for all of it. I was going through something. I wasn't myself. They should have understood. 5 years of silence. No calls, no visits, no apology in either direction. Now, here's something worth pausing on, because it applies to all of us. There's a concept in psychology called selective memory, and it's not just forgetting things. It's more subtle than that. It's the way our minds unconsciously edit painful events to protect our sense of self. We don't delete the memories, we reshape them. We soften our own role and sharpen everyone else's. Over time, the edited version becomes the only version we remember, and we genuinely believe it's the truth. Clara wasn't lying to herself on purpose. She really believed she was the only one who got hurt. She'd told the story so many times, to friends, to herself, in the quiet of her own kitchen, that the version where she was solely the victim had become the only one that existed. And the thing is, she was hurt. That part was real. But it wasn't the whole story. She just couldn't see the rest anymore. So when Margaret said, "My daughter abandoned me," Clara felt that in her bones. Not because she'd planned to find a kindred spirit, but because the story matched. And when a story matches your pain, you stop asking questions. 2 months, that's how long Margaret stayed. And in those 2 months, something quiet and powerful happened. They became each other's people. Morning tea became a ritual. Afternoon walks became sacred. Margaret told stories about her younger days, about love, about mistakes, about the daughter who left. Clara listened to every word, and eventually she shared her own story, the divorce, the inheritance, the 5 years of silence. She cried. Margaret held her. Clara said, "We're the same, you and me. The people who should have loved us the most just didn't." And Margaret nodded, because in her mind, that was true too. But here's what Clara missed, and I need you to watch for this because it's important. Margaret called Clara by another name once, then again a week later. She laughed it off both times, and Clara didn't think twice. She told the abandonment story again, but this time her daughter was younger in it, and the season had changed. Clara didn't notice because the feeling of the story was the same, and feeling was all she was listening for. Margaret stood in the hallway one morning, just standing there, looking at the walls like she'd never seen them before. Clara took her arm and walked her to the living room, didn't ask why. She told a coworker, "Margaret's the sweetest woman, just a little forgetful sometimes." And this is where I want to teach you something that could genuinely help someone you love. Early stage dementia doesn't look like what most people think. It's not dramatic confusion or forgetting your own name. In the beginning, it often looks like this: repeating stories with small inconsistencies, occasional disorientation in familiar places, covering up confusion with humor or deflection, asking the same question multiple times without realizing it. And here's the part that makes it so easy to miss. People with early dementia often develop confabulation. That's a clinical term for when the brain fills in memory gaps with invented information. It's not lying. The person genuinely believes what they're saying. Their brain is trying to make sense of a world that's becoming harder to hold on to, so it creates narratives, sometimes completely false ones, to fill the holes. Margaret's story about her daughter abandoning her mind made that up. Not out of malice, out of survival. Her brain needed a reason for why she was alone on that bench, and it built one that felt true. And Clara, with no medical background and every emotional reason to believe the story, never questioned it. Because a healthy mind doing selective editing and a broken mind doing confabulation can look exactly the same from the outside. Both are rewriting the past. Both believe their version. Both are trying to protect themselves from a truth that hurts too much. The difference is Margaret couldn't help it. Clara could. Margaret had been feeling off, tired, dizzy, not eating well. Clara, genuinely worried about the woman she'd grown to love, took her to the hospital for a checkup. And while they were waiting, someone recognized Margaret. Maybe a nurse, maybe a visitor. It doesn't matter who. What matters is what she said. "Isn't this Mrs. Bellamy? Her daughter has been looking for her for months." Clara's stomach dropped. She shook her head. "No, that's not right. Margaret told her." But then the doctor's assessment came back. Cognitive decline, memory fragmentation, dementia. The story about the abandonment, the story Clara had built her entire bond with Margaret around, the story that made them the same. It was never true. Lorraine arrived within hours, Margaret's daughter. She hadn't abandoned anyone. She'd been searching, desperately, relentlessly, for months. Police reports, flyers, shelters, sleepless nights. And Clara watched this reunion and felt something she didn't expect. Not relief, not happiness for Margaret, fear and anger. She challenged Lorraine. How did you lose her? It wasn't really about Lorraine. It was about Clara. Because if Margaret's abandonment story was a fabrication, just a broken mind filling in gaps, then what did that say about Clara's story? What if she'd been doing the same thing for 5 years with a perfectly healthy brain? That question terrified her more than anything. Margaret had a clear morning before she left. Lucidity comes and goes with dementia, and this morning it came like a gift. She understood what had happened. She understood that her mind had invented a lie, that it had turned her daughter into a villain and put Lorraine through months of agony. She held Lorraine and wept. She said sorry. Not, "I was sick, I didn't know," just, "I'm sorry for what I put you through." And then she sat with Clara, one last time. "Clara, I've felt your kindness every day in this house. That kindness is real. That's who you are." She paused. "But I also felt your loneliness, and that loneliness isn't all the world's fault." Clara tried to look away. Margaret held her gaze. "My mind was broken, and it told me a lie. It told me my daughter threw me away, and I believed it, because being wronged was easier than remembering the ways I'd failed her too." Her eyes glistened. "You don't have a broken mind, Clara. So what story are you telling yourself? Your mother, is she really the villain you've made her? Or have you been holding on to your version so long you've forgotten what actually happened?" Clara was crying now, not the controlled kind, the kind that comes from a place you've been guarding for years. Margaret squeezed her hands. "Nothing in this world beats family. Not pride, not pain, not being right. Go home to your mother, not because she deserves it. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. Go because 5 years is too long, and you're too full of love to keep living this empty." When Lorraine's car pulled away, Clara stood in the doorway of a house that felt enormous. Margaret's teacup was still on the kitchen counter. She didn't go right away. She sat with it for a day. She replayed the last 5 years, not the version she'd been telling herself, but the real one. The version where her sister called and Clara let it ring. The version where being the victim was easier than being accountable. Then she drove. Her mother opened the door, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Her mother looked older, 5 years older in a way that hit Clara physically, because she wasn't there for any of it. Clara spoke first, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for what I said. I was hurting and I made that your problem, and then I disappeared for 5 years. I don't have a speech. I don't want to do this anymore." Her mother didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't okay. She stepped forward and pulled Clara into her arms. They stood in that doorway, both crying, both imperfect, both exhausted from carrying 5 years of silence. Her mother whispered, "I thought I lost you forever." Clara broke all over again. "I'm here now." Later, her mother called Clara's sister. 20 minutes later, she walked through the door. There was no dramatic reunion speech, just 3 women at a kitchen table, the same table with scratch marks from Clara's childhood, sitting in the mess of 5 lost years and choosing to start cleaning it up. It wasn't perfect. It won't be for a long time, but the silence is over, and that's where healing begins. So that was the story of Clara and Margaret. And what really stands out to me is this. Margaret's broken mind created a false story of abandonment, but Clara's healthy mind did something frighteningly similar. She edited her own history until she was the only victim in it, and she believed that version completely. I think we all do this more than we realize. We replay our worst moments, but we soften our own lines and sharpen everyone else's. We don't mean to, it's how the brain protects us. But protection and healing aren't the same thing, and sometimes the story keeping you safe is the same one keeping you stuck. The other thing I want you to take from this is about kindness. Clara didn't help Margaret because she was a hero. She walked past the first time. She helped because the second time around, she just couldn't. And that one small decision changed her life. You never know what a single act of kindness will set in motion. You really don't. And if you have someone you haven't spoken to in a while, not because you forgot, but because the silence just went on too long, maybe today's the day. Not because it'll be easy, but because 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of silence built on a half-true story, that's too long for anyone. I wanted to share this story because I think we need more of these in our feeds. Stories that make us pause. Stories that make us honest with ourselves. If this resonated with you, leave a comment. Tell me, is there someone you've been meaning to reach out to? And if you haven't already, hit that like button. It truly helps the channel grow. And if you enjoy meaningful stories like this, consider subscribing. I'm Anna, this is BC Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.